I didn't mean to draw him. But somehow, he was the only face I couldn't forget. The subway car rattles beneath Lena Carter's feet, metal screeching against metal as it barrels through the underground, the stale air thick with the scent of rain-soaked coats and cheap coffee. And yet all she can focus on is the man sitting across from her, still as a statue, his dark coat dusted with melting snow, his gaze distant like he's somewhere else entirely, somewhere far from this crowded train. And before she can stop herself, her fingers move, pencil gliding across the worn page of her sketchbook, capturing the sharp line of his jaw, the shadow beneath his eyes, the quiet weight he seems to carry without saying a word. She tilts her head slightly, studying him, not in a way that draws attention, but in the way artists do, like she's trying to understand something invisible, something deeper than what's right in front of her. And for a moment, the world fades, the noise softens, the train slows, and it's just her and the rhythm of graphite against paper, until suddenly his voice cuts through the silence, low, calm, unexpected. You always draw strangers like that? Lena's hand freezes midline, her heart skipping. She hadn't realized he noticed. She looks up, caught, her cheeks warming. Only the ones that look like they're trying not to be seen, she says, attempting a small smile. But his expression doesn't change. If anything, something flickers behind his eyes, something almost like recognition, or maybe surprise. He leans forward just slightly, enough for her to see the faint reflection of herself in his gaze. And what do I look like? He asks, and for a second, she hesitates, because the answer feels too personal for a stranger, but honesty slips out anyway. Like you forgot who you are, she says softly, and the words hang there between them, fragile, dangerous. But he doesn't laugh, he doesn't brush it off. Instead, his lips curve just barely, not quite a smile, more like an acknowledgement. Maybe I did, he murmurs, and something about that makes her chest tighten. She looks back down at her sketch, suddenly aware of how unfinished it is. The eye still incomplete, the most important part missing. Don't stop, he says quietly, and she doesn't. Her hand moves again, slower now, more deliberate, trying to capture that exact moment, that exact feeling. But just as she begins to define the curve of his eyes, the train jolts, the brakes screech, and the announcement crackles overhead. The doors slide open, cold air rushing in, and when she looks up again, he's already standing, already turning away, blending into the crowd like he was never there. Wait, she calls instinctively, but her voice is swallowed by the noise. The crowd pushes forward, and in seconds, he's gone. Just another stranger lost in the city. Lena sits there for a moment, stunned, her fingers tightening around the sketchbook. She looks down at the page, at the unfinished face staring back at her. Something about it feels wrong now, incomplete in a way that bothers her more than it should. She exhales slowly, shaking her head. Get it together, she mutters under her breath, snapping the book shut as the train doors close again. The city moves on, just like it always does, but she doesn't know it yet, that this wasn't just another sketch, wasn't just another stranger, because somewhere above ground, in a world of glass towers and million-dollar decisions, the man she just drew is staring at a blank wall in his penthouse, replaying her words in his mind, and for the first time in years, wondering if someone just saw him more clearly than anyone ever has, and whether he should have let her finish the drawing. The next morning, Lena stands outside a narrow brick building on West 12th Street, her breath visible in the crisp air as she flips open her sketchbook again, staring at the unfinished face, the missing eyes bothering her more than it should, because it feels less like a drawing and more like a question she cannot answer, and she hates unanswered questions, especially when they come in the form of a stranger who somehow felt familiar. She shakes it off and pushes the door open, the small bell above it chiming softly as she steps into the studio, the smell of paint and turpentine wrapping around her like a second skin, but the warmth does nothing to ease the tension sitting in her chest. You are late again. Marcus calls from across the room without even looking up, his voice flat, tired, like he has already made up his mind about something. Lena drops her bag onto the worn wooden table, brushing snowflakes from her coat. It is 10 minutes, she replies, trying to keep her tone light. But something in the room feels different today, heavier, quieter. Marcus finally looks at her, and there is no humor in his expression, no patience either, 10 minutes is all it takes for someone else to take your spot, he says, and her stomach tightens instantly. She knows that tone. She has heard it before, just never directed at her. What are you saying? She asks, her voice lower now. Cautious, Marcus exhales slowly, like he does not want to say it, but will anyway. I am saying the studio is full, Lena, and clients want consistency, not someone who disappears into her own world whenever she feels like it. Her fingers curl slightly around the edge of the table. I do not disappear. I work, she says, but even as the words leave her mouth, she knows they sound weak, defensive. Marcus shakes his head, already turning away. You draw strangers on subways and call it work. He mutters, and that hits harder than she expects, because it is true. She does not argue again, because there is nothing left to argue. She just nods once, quietly, and begins gathering her things, her sketchbook the last thing she picks up, her thumb brushing over the unfinished page before she snaps it shut. Outside, the cold hits sharper this time, like the city itself is reminding her where she stands. No studio, no clients, no plan, just a backpack, a pencil, and a face she cannot forget. Hours later, she ends up where she always does when things fall apart, a corner near the subway entrance on 34th Street, where the foot traffic is heavy and people sometimes stop long enough to notice. She sets up her small folding stool, pulls her sketchbook onto her lap, and writes a simple sign in thick black marker. $10 for a portrait. She sits there for nearly 30 minutes before anyone even slows down, the city moving fast. Indifferent, until finally, a young couple pauses, the woman smiling. Can you draw us? She asks, and Lena nods, forcing a small smile back. Sit, she says, gesturing to the empty crate in front of her, her hand steadier now, her mind slipping into the rhythm she knows best. Lines, shapes, shadows. She finishes quickly, clean, practiced, and when she hands it over, the woman lights up, pressing a $10 bill into Lena's hand. This is amazing, she says, and for a moment, it feels like enough, like maybe she can still do this, maybe she will be okay. But as the couple walks away, Lena flips to the next blank page, and without thinking, without deciding, her pencil moves again, sketching the same face, the same jawline, the same quiet weight in his expression. Her breath slows, her focus sharpens, and when she reaches the eyes, she hesitates, her hand hovering, because she realizes something that makes her pulse quicken. She does not remember his eyes clearly, not their exact color, not their exact shape, just the feeling behind them, like he was standing on the edge of something unseen. And for the first time, Lena Carter, who has built her entire life on seeing people as they are, realizes she might not have seen him clearly at all, and that thought unsettles her more than losing the studio ever could. By late afternoon, the cold begins to settle deeper into Lena's bones, the kind that creeps past layers of fabric and lingers, but she barely notices anymore, because her focus is locked on the page in front of her, the same unfinished face staring back, the same missing eyes refusing to take shape no matter how many times she tries. She exhales slowly, rubbing her fingers together for warmth before lifting the pencil again. You are going to scare people away if you keep frowning at your own drawing like that. A voice says, calm, familiar, and it hits her a second before she even looks up, her breath catching as her gaze snaps forward. And there he is, standing just a few feet away. No snow this time. No rushing crowd. Just him, solid, real, hands tucked into the pockets of a dark coat that somehow looks both expensive and understated at the same time. Like it was designed not to be noticed, but impossible to ignore once seen. Lena blinks once, twice, as if making sure he is not something her mind created out of frustration. You disappeared, she says before she can stop herself, her voice sharper than she intended. His lips curve slightly, not quite amused, more like he expected that. So did you? He replies, nodding toward her sketchbook. You never finished. She glances down instinctively, then back up at him. Something about the way he stands there, calm, patient, like he has nowhere else to be, unsettles her. You left before I could, she says, and there is a hint of accusation in her tone now, subtle but present. He studies her for a moment, really studies her, like she did to him on the train, and there is that same flicker again in his eyes, something guarded, something careful. Then finish it now, he says simply, stepping closer without asking, lowering himself onto the crate across from her like he belongs there. Remember, but because she is not sure what she is seeing up close, they are not just tired, they are layered, controlled, like someone who has learned how to hide everything behind a single look. You are doing it again, he says quietly, and she does not look up. Doing what? She asks, her voice softer now, more focused, trying to figure me out instead of just drawing what is there. He replies, and she almost smiles at that. Because he is not wrong, she shifts slightly, leaning forward, studying him in silence for a few seconds longer before her pencil moves again, slower now, more careful, capturing not just the shape, but the hesitation, the distance, the quiet restraint in his gaze. The city noise fades again, the footsteps, the traffic, the distant sirens, all of it blurs into the background as she works, until finally, she stops, her hand lowering as she looks at what she has done. The face is complete now, the eyes no longer empty, but something about them feels heavier, more honest than she expected. She turns the sketchbook toward him, watching his reaction carefully, and for the first time since she met him, he goes completely still, his gaze locked on the page, something shifting behind his expression that he does not hide quickly enough. And that is when Lena realizes, whatever she just drew, it is closer to the truth than he is comfortable with. Alexander does not speak right away, and that silence stretches just long enough for Lena to feel it settle under her skin, because this is the moment where people usually smile politely, say something easy, something safe, but he does neither. His eyes remain fixed on the drawing, on the version of himself she just put on paper, and for the first time, he looks unguarded, not completely, but enough for her to notice the shift, subtle but real, like a crack in something carefully built over time. That is not what I expected, he finally says, his voice quieter now, less controlled, and Lena leans back slightly, studying him the same way she had moments ago. Most people say it looks like them. She replies, her tone steady, but her attention sharp, watching every reaction, every hesitation. He exhales slowly, a breath that feels heavier than it should, before lifting his gaze from the page to meet hers. And there is something different there now, something that was not there on the train, something that was not there even a few minutes ago. It does, he says, that is the problem. And that answer lingers between them, not dramatic, not loud, but weighty in a way Lena cannot quite explain. She tilts her head slightly, curiosity pulling at her despite herself. You do not like being seen? She asks, and this time, there is no immediate response. He looks away briefly, scanning the street as if grounding himself in something familiar, something easier, before his gaze returns to her. People see what they want to see, he says, measured, careful, like each word is chosen on purpose. You did not. Lena considers that for a second, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the sketchbook. Maybe I just saw what you were trying to hide, she says, and the corner of his mouth lifts. Again, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement, like she is closer than she should be, and that does not seem to make him comfortable, but it does not make him leave either. Instead, he reaches for the sketchbook, his movements slow, deliberate, giving her time to stop him if she wants to, but she does not. She lets him take it, lets him hold the page, and when he does, his grip tightens just slightly, almost imperceptible. But she notices, because that is what she does. She notices the things people try to control. How long have you been doing this? He asks without looking up, and she shrugs lightly. Long enough to know when someone is pretending, she says, and this time, he actually lets out a soft breath that almost sounds like a quiet laugh. Almost, but not quite. He closes the sketchbook gently, placing it back on her lap, his fingers brushing the cover for just a second longer than necessary before pulling away. And when he stands, the shift in energy is immediate. Like the moment is closing, like whatever space existed between them is about to disappear again. Keep the 100, he says, adjusting his coat slightly, returning to that composed version of himself she first saw, the one that blends into everything while standing out at the same time. Lena frowned slightly, glancing at the bill still resting on her book. That was not the deal, she says, but he shakes his head once. Simple, final. It was worth more, he replies, and there is something in the way he says it that makes her pause, not because of the money, but because of the meaning behind it, something unspoken, something she cannot quite define. He turns to leave then, stepping back into the flow of people moving along the sidewalk. And just like before, it would be easy for him to disappear, to become another stranger in the city. But this time, Lena does not let it happen. Wait, she calls, her voice cutting through the noise sharper than she expects. He stops, not immediately, but after a step or two, turning just enough to look back at her. And for a moment, neither of them speaks, the city moving around them. The distance between them small but noticeable. What is your name? He asks, and the question feels simple, normal, but something about it carries weight, like it matters more than it should. He studies her again, that same careful gaze, measuring, deciding, and then, after a brief pause, he answers, Alex, he says, not quite a lie, not quite the truth, and before she can ask anything else, before she can push further, he turns again and walks away, disappearing into the crowd for the second time, leaving Lena sitting there with a finished drawing, $100 bill, and a name that feels incomplete in a way she cannot ignore. That night, Lena cannot stop thinking about him. Not the way he looked or the way he spoke, but the way he reacted to the drawing. The way something shifted behind his eyes like she had uncovered something he did not want found. And that feeling lingers long after the city quiets down, long after she packs up her things and walks the 12 blocks back to her tiny studio apartment. The kind with peeling paint near the window and a radiator that clanks like it has its own heartbeat. She drops her bag onto the floor and sits on the edge of her bed, pulling the sketchbook back into her hands almost immediately, flipping to his page again, the finished one, the one that finally has eyes. And for a moment, she just stares at it, studying every line, every shadow, like she is trying to understand what exactly she saw in him that he could not hide. Her fingers trace lightly over the paper, stopping at the eyes, because that is where everything is. That is where the truth always is. Alex, she murmurs under her breath, testing the name, and it feels wrong. Not completely, but enough to make her frown, like it is only part of something bigger, something missing. She exhales, leaning back against the wall as the noise of the radiator fills the silence. You are not just Alex, she says quietly, and the certainty in her voice surprises even her, because she does not know how she knows. She just does. The next morning comes too fast, gray light slipping through the window, and Lena is already awake before the alarm, her mind restless, her thoughts circling the same question over and over again. Who is he? She shakes it off, forcing herself into routine. Coffee from the corner deli, same spot near the subway entrance, same folding stool, same sign. But nothing feels the same now, because every time someone sits in front of her, every time she lifts her pencil, part of her expects to see him again, expects him to step out of the crowd like yesterday, calm, composed, watching her like he already knows something she does not. But hours pass, and he does not come. The city moves on, indifferent as always. People come and go, faces blur together, and by noon, the cold has settled in again. Sharper today, the wind cutting down the avenue in quick, biting gusts. Lena pulls her coat tighter around herself, her breath visible as she flips to a new page. But instead of drawing the couple sitting in front of her, her hand hesitates, then shifts, the lines forming without permission, familiar, automatic, his face again. The same structure, the same quiet intensity, and she stops halfway, frustration building as she presses the pencil down harder than necessary. Focus, she mutters under her breath, tearing the page out and crumpling it lightly before dropping it into the small trash bag at her feet. But even as she tries to move on, the feeling does not leave, that sense that something important is just out of reach, just beyond what she can see. Later that afternoon, as the sky begins to dim and the streetlights flicker on one by one, Lena packs up early, something she rarely does, her energy drained, her mind too distracted to keep going. She slings her bag over her shoulder and starts walking without a clear destination, her feet carrying her through streets she knows by memory, past storefronts and cafes and people wrapped in their own lives, until she stops in front of a large glass building without realizing it. Her reflection staring back at her from the polished surface, small, out of place, and behind that reflection, inside, everything is different. Bright lights, clean lines, people in tailored suits moving with purpose. And for a moment, she just stands there, watching, something pulling at her attention, something she cannot explain until her eyes catch on a large screen mounted in the lobby, displaying a corporate interview. A man standing confidently in front of a crowd, speaking with calm authority, and Lena freezes, her breath catching instantly, because she recognizes him before her mind can even process it. The same face, the same jawline, the same eyes she struggled to draw, except now they are sharper, colder, controlled in a way she did not see up close. The name appears beneath him in bold letters: Alexander Hayes, founder and chief executive officer, and the world around her seems to quiet for just a second as everything clicks into place. The $100 bill, the coat, the way he spoke about time like it belonged to him, the way he reacted to being seen, and Lena's grip tightens slightly on the strap of her bag as one thought settles clearly in her mind. She did not just draw a stranger. She drew a man who was never supposed to be sitting across from her on a sidewalk, pretending to be ordinary. For a moment, Lena does not move, her reflection still faintly visible against the glass as the name echoes in her mind. Alexander Hayes. Not Alex, not a stranger, but someone whose face belongs on screens, in headlines, in rooms she has never stepped into. And the realization lands heavier than she expects, not because of what he is, but because of what he chose not to be when he sat across from her. She exhales slowly, her breath fogging the glass before she steps back, creating distance between herself and the image, but it does nothing to settle the unease building in her chest, because now every detail replays differently. The coat, the $100 bill, the way he talked about being seen. It was never casual, it was controlled, intentional, and somehow that makes it worse. She turns away from the building, her steps slower now, less certain, her mind racing ahead of her, trying to piece together something that no longer feels simple. Because this is not just about a man lying about his name. This is about someone stepping into a world that is not his and acting like it is. And the question that keeps pushing forward is not why he did it, but why her? Why sit down across from her? Why let her draw him? Why come back? Her grip tightens slightly on her bag as she walks, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement. Everything familiar but slightly off, like the ground has shifted just enough to make her aware of it. She does not go home right away. Instead, she circles the block once, then again, her thoughts looping, until finally, she stops under a streetlight and pulls out her phone. The screen lighting up her face as she types his name without hesitation, Alexander Hayes, and within seconds, the results flood in: articles, interviews, images, all of it polished, curated, controlled. She scrolls slowly, her eyes scanning each headline, each photo, trying to match the man she met with the one on the screen, and it does not quite align, not completely. The man in the articles is sharper, colder, someone who makes decisions that move entire companies, while the one she drew had something quieter beneath the surface, something less defined. She taps on a recent interview, watching as he speaks with that same measured tone, the same control in his posture. But now that she has seen him up close, she notices things others would not. The slight pause before he answers certain questions, the way his gaze shifts just slightly when something becomes too personal, the subtle tension in his jaw that never fully relaxes, and it hits her then, not all at once, but enough to make her inhale sharply. He did not just hide who he was trying to escape it, even if only for a moment. She lowers the phone slowly, her mind settling into something clearer now, less chaotic, more focused. Because the confusion is starting to turn into something else, something steadier, something that feels closer to understanding. She glances back toward the building, its glass reflecting the city lights like nothing has changed, like it is just another part of the skyline. But now it feels different. Now it feels like a boundary, one she did not realize she had crossed, or maybe one he crossed first. Her lips press together slightly as a new thought forms, quieter but stronger than the rest. He chose to sit in her world, not the other way around. And that matters more than anything else, because it means whatever happened between them was not an accident, not entirely. She slips her phone back into her pocket and adjusts the strap of her bag, her posture shifting just slightly, more grounded now, more certain, because if he is going to step into her world and pretend to be someone else, then she is not going to pretend she did not see through it. And as she starts walking again, this time toward home, one decision settles clearly in her mind. If she sees him again, she is not going to call him Alex. The next day, Lena returns to her usual spot earlier than usual. The cold air sharper, but her focus clearer, her movements more deliberate as she sets up her stool, her sign, her sketchbook resting open on her lap, not to a blank page this time, but to his drawing, the completed one, the one that changed everything. And for a moment she just sits there, watching the crowd pass, her eyes scanning faces without really seeing them. Because now she knows what she is looking for, not a stranger, not Alex, but Alexander Hayes, the man who chose to sit in front of her like none of it mattered, like he could step out of his world and into hers without consequence. And that thought lingers. Not as anger, not entirely, but as something sharper, something closer to resolve. Hours pass, the city moving in its usual rhythm, footsteps, voices, the distant hum of traffic, and Lena works, sketching faces, handing over portraits, collecting small bills that barely add up. But today, she does not lose herself in it the same way. Part of her remains aware, alert, waiting, until finally, just as the afternoon light begins to fade into that soft gray that settles over the streets, she feels it before she sees it, that subtle shift, that quiet awareness that someone is watching, and she looks up slowly, her gaze steady, and there he is again, standing just beyond the edge of her small setup, hands in his coat pockets, posture relaxed but controlled, like he has been there for a moment already, observing, waiting, and this time, she does not freeze, she does not hesitate. She simply closes her sketchbook gently and sets it aside, her eyes never leaving his. Alexander Hayes, she says, her voice calm but firm, and the name lands between them with weight. Real, undeniable, and for a split second, something changes in his expression, not shock exactly, but recognition, like he knew this moment would come, like he has been expecting it. He exhales quietly, the faintest shift in his shoulders. So you looked me up, he replies, his tone even, but there is something beneath it now, something less guarded than before. Lena tilts her head slightly, studying him again, but this time without the distance, without the uncertainty. You lied, she says simply, and he does not argue, does not deflect. Instead, he nods once, small, controlled. I did not tell you everything, he corrects, and that distinction makes her almost smile. Almost, but she does not let it show. You told me your name was Alex, she presses, and he meets her gaze fully now. No hesitation. It is, he says, and there is truth in that, enough to make her pause, but not enough to change what matters. It is not the whole truth, she replies, and the air between them tightens just slightly, not tense, but charged, like something important is finally being said out loud. People continue walking past them, unaware, uninterested, the city moving as it always does. But for Lena, everything feels focused, narrowed down to this one moment, this one conversation. Why? She asks then, the question simple, direct, but carrying everything she has been turning over in her mind since last night. Why sit there? Why let her draw him? Why come back? Why pretend? And this time, Alexander does not answer right away. He looks away briefly, his gaze shifting toward the street, toward the passing cars and strangers, like he is grounding himself again, choosing his words carefully. And when he looks back at her, there is something different there, something closer to honesty than she has seen before, because no one looks at me like that, he says quietly, and the simplicity of it catches her off guard, not because it is dramatic, but because it feels real, stripped of everything else. She studies him for a second longer, searching for something false, something calculated, but she does not find it. Not this time. And that unsettles her in a completely different way, because it means this is not just a game, not just curiosity. It means something mattered to him in that moment. Something real. Her fingers brush lightly against the edge of her sketchbook again, grounding herself as she exhales slowly. You could have told me, she says, softer now, less accusation, more truth, and he nods slightly, accepting that. I could have, he agrees, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, the space between them no longer uncertain, but not settled either, just open. And then, without breaking eye contact, he steps closer, just enough to close the distance between them, his voice lower now, more direct. Would you have drawn me the same way if you knew? He asks, and that question lands deeper than she expects, because it forces her to consider something she has not yet fully faced, not who he is, but how that changes what she sees. And for the first time since she met him, Lena. Carter does not answer right away. Lena's silence stretches just long enough for the question to settle fully between them, not as pressure, but as something heavier, something that demands honesty, and she does not look away this time, her gaze steady on his, searching, measuring, not the man the world sees, not the one on screens and headlines, but the one standing in front of her now, waiting for an answer he probably already thinks he knows. She inhales slowly, the cold air sharp in her lungs, grounding her before she finally speaks. No, she says, her voice quiet but clear, and something in his expression shifts, subtle, almost imperceptible, like he expected that answer but still feels it land. She tilts her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just a fraction as she continues. I would have drawn what everyone else sees, she adds. And now there is something firmer in her tone, something that carries weight beyond the words themselves. The version you show them. His jaw tightens just slightly, not defensive, but aware, like he recognizes the truth in that. And she leans forward just a little, closing the distance in a way that is not physical, but intentional. But that is not what I saw. She finishes, and for a moment, neither of them moves. The city still flowing around them, footsteps passing, voices blending into the background. But everything between them feels still, focused, and Alexander exhales slowly. The sound almost lost in the noise, but she hears it. She always hears the things people do not mean to show. His gaze drops briefly to the sketchbook resting beside her, then back to her face. And there is something there now that was not there before, something less guarded, less controlled, like a layer has been peeled back whether he intended it or not. That is exactly why I did not tell you, he says quietly, and the honesty in that catches her off guard again, not because of what he says, but because of how easily he says it now, like the distance he kept before is no longer necessary. Lena studies him for another second, letting that settle, letting the truth of it move through her thoughts, because it changes things, not completely, but enough. You wanted to see who you are without all of it, she says, her voice softer now, less confrontational, more understanding, and he nods once, slow, deliberate. For a moment, he admits, and there is something in the way he says it that feels heavier than it should, like that moment mattered more than he expected, like it gave him something he has not had in a long time. Lena glances down at the sketchbook again, her fingers brushing the edge before she opens it, flipping to the drawing, the one that started all of this, and she turns it toward him again. But this time, she is not watching his reaction the same way. She is not analyzing, not searching for cracks. She is simply letting him see it, letting him face it. And for a second, he just looks at it, quieter now, more still, like he is seeing it differently too. You cannot stay there, she says suddenly, her voice cutting gently through the moment, and he looks up at her, a faint crease forming between his brows. Where? He asks, and she gestures lightly toward the sketch, toward the version of him she captured. In between, she replies, her tone steady. Certain, you are either that man, she adds, nodding toward the drawing, or the one on that screen, and her eyes hold his, not accusing, not judging, just stating something that feels undeniably true, but pretending to be both is not going to work forever. The words hang there, simple but sharp, and for the first time, Alexander does not have an immediate response, not because he cannot answer, but because there is nothing easy to say, nothing controlled enough to deflect what she just pointed out, and that silence says more than anything else could. Lena closes the sketchbook gently, resting her hands on top of it as she leans back slightly, the tension in her posture easing just a little. I do not need to know everything about you, she says after a moment, her voice quieter now, more grounded. But I am not going to pretend I do not see it either. And that is the line, the boundary she draws without raising her voice, without stepping away, just by being clear. And something about that lands with him differently than anything else she has said so far, because this is not rejection, not exactly, but it is not acceptance either. It is something in between, something real, and as the city lights flicker on fully around them, casting soft reflections across the street, Alexander Hayes stands there, not as the man on the screen, not as the stranger on the subway, but somewhere in the space she just defined. And for the first time, it is clear that he does not know which version of himself she is going to choose to believe. The space between them does not close, but it does not widen either. It simply holds, steady and quiet, as Lena's words settle into something neither of them can ignore. And for a moment, Alexander does something he has not done since he first approached her. He stops trying to control the outcome. His gaze shifts away briefly, not to avoid her, but to think, to actually consider what she said instead of responding to it. And when he looks back, there is no immediate answer, no polished line. Just a man standing in front of her without the usual distance. "You make it sound simple," he says finally, his voice lower now, less certain, and Lena exhales softly, a faint breath of air visible between them as the evening deepens. "It is not simple," she replies, her tone calm, grounded. "It is just honest." And that distinction lands differently, heavier, because honesty is not something he can negotiate, not something he can shape into something easier. And for the first time, Alexander Hayes, the man who builds entire systems around control and precision, stands in a moment where neither of those things help him. His eyes flicker briefly toward the sketchbook again, then back to her, and something shifts in his posture, subtle but real, like he is stepping out of something he has worn for too long. "I do not know which one I am anymore," he admits, and the words come out quieter than expected, but clearer than anything else he has said, and Lena does not react immediately. She does not rush to fill the silence. She simply watches him, taking that in, because this is not the version of him she saw on the screen. This is not the version the world interacts with. This is the one that sat across from her and asked her not to stop drawing. And she nods once, slowly, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. "Then do not decide it here," she says, her voice softer now, less guarded. "Do not decide it in front of me." And that might have sounded like distance, like rejection, but it is not. It is something else, something more grounded, more real. "Figure it out when no one is watching," she adds, and something about that lands deeper than anything else, because it removes her from the center of it. It removes the performance, the need to be seen a certain way, and for a second, he just stands there, absorbing that. The noise of the city filling the edges of the moment again, reminding them both that everything else is still moving, still happening. Lena reaches for her bag then, her movements unhurried, natural, like the conversation has reached a point where nothing else needs to be forced. She slides the sketchbook inside carefully, her fingers lingering for just a second on the cover before letting it go, and when she stands, the height difference between them becomes more noticeable. But it does not change the balance of the moment. Not anymore. "What happens now?" he asks, and the question is simple, but it carries more weight than it should, because it is not about business or decisions or outcomes. It is about something far less structured, something he cannot predict. Lena adjusts the strap on her shoulder, her gaze steady as she meets his again, and this time, there is no hesitation in her answer. "That depends on you," she says, and the clarity in her voice leaves no room for misunderstanding, no space to twist it into something easier. "Not on who you are," she continues, her tone firm but not harsh. "On what you do next." And there it is, the line drawn clearly. Not about his title, not about his world, but about his choices, about whether he continues to stand between two versions of himself or finally steps into one. And for a moment, neither of them moves, the air between them steady, unresolved but not uncertain, just open. And then Lena turns, not abruptly, not dramatically, just naturally, stepping back into the flow of the city, her figure blending into the movement of people heading home, heading somewhere, anywhere, and Alexander remains where he is for a few seconds longer, watching her go, not chasing, not calling out, just watching. And as she disappears into the crowd the same way he did before, he reaches into his coat pocket slowly, pulling out something small, something he has been carrying since the moment she handed it to him. The torn page from her sketchbook, the one with his face on it. His fingers trace lightly over the lines, over the eyes she drew, the ones that saw something he has not been able to define for years, and for the first time. He does not look away from it. He does not close himself off from what it shows. Instead, he holds it there, steady, as the city lights reflect off the paper, and somewhere between the man on the screen and the one in the drawing, Alexander Hayes stands at a point he cannot avoid anymore, because now, someone else has seen it too, and whether he returns to her world or disappears back into his own, one thing is certain. He can no longer pretend he does not know exactly who he is becoming.